Okay, a couple things that I want to talk about really fast with Lightroom, just to make sure everybody in this room is good and okay with this. So, how many people in this room are completely aware of the fact that there are two versions of Lightroom? There is Lightroom Classic, and then there's just Lightroom. Now, they've called this like 1,000 things in the last 2 years. They couldn't make this thing more confusing if they tried to, in my opinion. But we're not alone in that regard. So for instance, that Lightroom right there is not the one you want to use. So I'm going to show you the difference in the two, and this is a big difference. So I'm going to go up to my cloud and show you the application. So take a look. This is the way you'll know really fast if you're using the right one or the wrong one. The reason I say this is that there's one version of Lightroom. Lightroom Classic actually sits on your computer, and you run it off of your computer. Then there's just the Lightroom version, which is in the cloud, and it only will operate on files that you upload to the storage in your Adobe partition. Now, Adobe has given us 100 gigabytes, so you have quite a bit of space that's up there. You could actually conceivably do this. But the version of Lightroom that exists in the cloud is a very extremely dumbed down, stupid version of the desktop application. And so things that you can do in the desktop, you can't touch on the version that's in the cloud. To see the difference in the two, take a look at this one right here. This is the one that happens in the cloud, and the way you can tell the difference is, number one, it's just called Lightroom, but the real easy way to tell is that the corners of this icon are rounded. And that rounded should tell you that it's, I don't know what it should tell you, but that's the one you do not want to use. It's also sort of a more cyanic-y kind of bluish border around it. Do not use this version of Lightroom. You will hate your life. Instead, if we continue down here, it's this version of Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, which is the desktop-focused version of it. You can see that the borders are more of it's a paler blue. The corners of this icon are square. And to be honest with you, the chair of the department here just spent a week at Adobe over the summer. And this is how the Adobe engineers make a distinction between the two. They call one the square corner and the other the round corner. How pathetic is that? They even realized, the engineers realized that this was, it's a PR nightmare. They should have simply given it another name, but they didn't. So at any rate, has everybody had a chance to import this file into their Lightroom catalog?
I have a permissions problem randomly, so I'm just trying to fix that real quick.
Okay.
I can download it. Look.
I was going to say, is that you?
Yeah.
Go ahead and sign out and sign back in again. No, sign out. Yeah. Well, while that's doing that, so did the rest of you guys get it imported into your Lightroom catalog? Are we good on this part? They may not. So real quick, just to work you guys through this to make sure you know how to do it. If you click on the import button, It'll allow you to pick your source over here on the side, so you just need to navigate to that folder. Yeah, that is a problem.
I just watched.
But that's still a problem because you're going to need to get these apps sooner or later. You need to email IT about that because apparently you're not registered.
Oh, but on my laptop I have
Oh, it's okay on your laptop? All right, then let's see this. Let's just see if they have by any chance.
Oh, there is?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
All right, did that work out yet? No?
I have to manually change permissions to some folders, so just do if they want.
Okay, all right. Well, you don't need to worry about this too much. Just watch on the screen, whatever, because we're just going to blow through this really pretty quickly. I just wanted to show everybody about this. So at any rate, for those of you who do have it, click on it, and then we come into the Develop module. So the one up at the very top to click on Develop. And in here, you can see that this is in very, very, very similar fashion to what we were just dealing with before. And the first thing that we, again, want to do is deal with that color profile right here. So the one that we've made, the whole process that we did to make that, it's available here in Lightroom just like it was available in Camera Raw. So if you come over to the little 4 squares over here and you click on the drop down, it opens up exactly the way it did in Camera Raw for Photoshop. If you scroll down to the bottom, you will actually see there is a drop-down menu right down here that says Profiles. That's where all the custom ones are done. All these other ones that sit up here at the top, like Adobe Vivid, Adobe, there's a bunch of black and white, whatever. Those are all canned profiles by Adobe. But the ones that we make are stored right here in this profile folder. So scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, and you'll find the one that I just made today. This was the one that's called Verser EOS 5D Mark II. It's sitting right here, and I'm simply going to click on that guy, and that again applies the profile just like we did before, just like we did in Camera Raw. We can close this guy up now. Then in in Lightroom, the white balancing tool is this eyedropper guy right here. So again, if you click on this eyedropper, if you hover over it, it says white balance tool. If you click on this guy, and then again, I'm going to come over and I'm going to do the same thing that we did when we were working in Camera Raw. I'm going to click on the sweater to really pervert the color to make it, you know, like super off. And then I'm going to again click on that very same color picker guy, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick one of the gray, neutral gray patches that are sitting down here at the bottom, and I'm going to click on that, and it actually neutralizes it out. So it is the exact same steps that we did before in doing this. One of the problems that I have though doing this work in Lightroom is this. If you come down here to this area that we were looking at down on here to actually try to get this readout, again, when we were talking about the RGB readouts, remember I said I wanted mine in the mid-20s? The problem that we have in Lightroom is that in Lightroom, we have not assigned a color space. So because we have not assigned a color space, the readouts that you get under this histogram are in percentages, and those percentages are somewhat meaningless. This is like, or the red is a 2.1%, the green is a 2. It doesn't mean anything. It's not on a scale that we can actually work with. That 0 to 255 scale does not exist in Lightroom because this is still a raw file. This file has not been processed. We would have to designate how we wanted it to be, or open this up into Photoshop, one way or the other. But in Lightroom, the advantage that I had about being able to read those numbers and set my exposure and open up my shadows and to do all of that kind of stuff does not exist here in Lightroom because of by definition, it can't. Does that sort of make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's unfortunate, but it's true. In this case, this is still a raw file, whereas the thing that we were working with in Camera Raw, because we had made a designation about what TIFF or Photoshop file that was going to be in, we had established that space and we could get those readouts. Does that sort of make sense? So I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't be working in one or the other. For me, I do all of this work in Camera Raw. I just do. It's not to say that you can't do a lot of this in Lightroom, because so far we've applied the profile. That part's been great. We've actually color neutralized it. That part's been great as well. But in terms of then adjusting this image, then you're pretty much on your own, in the sense that you're going to be basing your judgments based on the screen. And does it look too dark? Does it look too contrasty? Blah, 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 blah on screen.
What about basing off the histogram?
Again, the histogram is really, because what's happening is that, here, this is what's happening. I'm going to show you this file back into Camera Raw again really quickly. So you don't need to do this, but I am going to do it, just so that you understand this difference that I'm trying to make in here. Here in Camera Raw, you can see right down here at the very bottom of this, for those of you who've never worked in Camera Raw before, there's some settings. I'm going to reset this to its default. So I'm going to go back to before I've done anything on this. So I've wiped off all the changes. But here at the very bottom of Camera Raw default, you'll see that in my case, it says down here, Adobe RGB, 8-bit, whatever. This is a link. If you click on this link, it'll open up. And in this thing that opens up, this is telling Camera Raw the space that you are going to bring it into in Photoshop. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to bring this in Camera Raw, in Adobe RGB. I could say I want to bring it in sRGB. I could say I wanted to bring in any of these others. I can say I want to designate that. When I do this step, then Adobe will say, okay, I understand these things out here will make sense. To show you what that means on a certain level, somebody do me a favor, write these numbers down. You can see that this is an Adobe RGB right now. I'm going to click on that color sampler tool again one more time, and I'm simply going to click on the color of her shirt. Could somebody write these numbers down? It's a red 96, green 69. Actually, I'm going to write them down right here on the board. No, because we need to be able to see. These are going to change, and I want you to be able to refer back to this. So in Adobe RGB, if that's going to be our designated space to work in Photoshop, my values are 96, green is 69, and blue is 144. So that's going to be an Adobe RGB. I'm going to then change my designated color space, and I'm going to go to, for the most of you guys, the only other space that you would probably ever consider will be sRGB or ProPhoto. We'll take a look at both. So I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to change this, and instead of doing that, I'm going to change it down to ProPhoto RGB and say OK. And you can see the numbers have radically changed. I've now got an 84 for my red instead of a 96. So this is ProPhoto. So in here I've got a red of 84, a green of 59, and a red of 121. Those numbers are radically different. And so this is what's happened. In Camera Raw, I can say, this is the destination space. This is where I want you to do it. And so it gives me the numbers, the readouts. But in Lightroom, that doesn't happen, because in Lightroom, you haven't picked a destination for it to go out to. It's just sitting as its raw file state in Lightroom. You haven't said, okay, this is where I want it to go. This is the color space I want it to be. So because of that, they give you percentages instead. It doesn't, again, but nobody knows what percentages really mean. 2.1% red is meaningless to everybody. Even if you're a hyper geeky Adobe engineer, those things don't mean anything to you. Does that sort of make sense? So that's one of the issues. So for me, again, when I pick this color point down here, I've got readouts that I've got that I know I can actually work in. Look at how different these readouts are in ProPhoto. These are like way down. I would have to open this way up to actually get that to be color detail. Whereas if I go back to Adobe RGB and say, okay, these are a little bit better, but they're still, I got to really crank this thing open if I want to have shadow detail down in that area. I don't have that ability in Lightroom. It just isn't there. I can open the shadows, but I don't have anything that'll give me a readout. I don't know here. I know exactly. I know I've got to get that up in the mid-20s because I've done all the testing on it, and I know there's no equivalent to that in Lightroom.
But technically, like the actual histogram, if we're just looking at like the curves,
Yeah.
like you can, it's still the same. That's still, I know it's visual. It's not as accurate as like numbers. But
No, the thing is it actually is accurate. Because it is a raw file and it hasn't been processed or you haven't said this is the target yet. Yeah, no, the histogram is still legitimate. But again, their percentages, it's not, the histogram there is not giving it out to you in that same 0 to 255 scale that you get here. Because that's what these are right here. These are the 0 to 255. That's what's going on in this range. Okay. So that gets us through this part. Are there any questions about the Lightroom part? Does this make sense to you guys where this is going here? So again, it's that very same process. You build a profile for this, you put it in, you find something in this image to color balance. Again, I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to zoom back out of this. I'm going to pervert the color one more time by clicking on her shirt to actually really get that to go wonky. And then I'm going to come in over here to, again, I'm going to look for that parking sign. It's sitting right there. I'm going to click on this white point again, and I'm going to click on the parking sign, and you can see it's neutralizing my color out again. So all of those same steps exist in both worlds. Again, the interface is slightly different, but the way it works is identical. The engine that does it is identical. Are we good on this part? Okay, so I am going to get out of Lightroom. I don't need to be here. So now we need to go after the next part of all the lies. Sorry. So if we take a look at our issue right here. So far what we've now done is this guy right here. We've actually, again, you'll hear this. You won't see it on the screen. I don't, when I actually in Keynote, I don't get a cursor anymore. So now what we have done is we have built this camera profile right here. And as we're coming into either Camera Raw or Lightroom or any of our other input software, this is the space that we're in right now. And so now if we are in Photoshop, not in Lightroom right now, but if we go back into Photoshop and we say okay to this, it comes into this space right here. This is our working space. These spaces here in Photoshop are Adobe RGB, sRGB, ProPhoto RGB. The advantage of these guys right here is that these are not device-dependent spaces. So remember, what we're struggling with here is the fact that every device, every monitor, every camera has a bias to it. However, the spaces, the working spaces that are in Photoshop here are device independent. These are mathematical spaces. They're theoretical. They don't really exist. They don't describe any particular device. They simply exist as a color space that you can load this color into. And the advantage of having it be device independent is that all of ours are identical. So if I've got a file that's in Adobe RGB and I give it to you and you open it up in Photoshop in Adobe RGB, it is identical because that space is independent of any device. It's a theoretical mathematical space. Does that make sense? So it allows us to trade files as much as we want without ever perverting the color or changing it because it's always going into this space that is common for everybody in the world who uses Photoshop. Make sense? So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, what we're going to do right now, though, is we are going to first build this. So once I get into this space, I'm fine. But now the problem that I've got, and this will hold true for you guys in Lightroom as well, now the problem I got is that my monitor is lying to me. I know my monitor is lying to me, so I need to build this profile to make my monitor honest and show me what the true color really is. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do that. You will hear this on, well, actually you'll see probably most of this on the video. I brought my calibrator. This is what it looks like. You can also get these in the media center here. So again, on the 4th floor of 623 is where you want to get this. There's 2 or 3 of these in the photo studio if you make it to the photo studio. There used to be a whole set of these in the 9th floor print lab, but they've moved them all down now to the media center. So again, 4th floor media center, they have all of this stuff. This is what you're looking for, but the thing is that you need to know, you should write this down because this one's important. There are two different versions of this profiler. One's called a Color Monkey. It's not the one you want to use. This is the I1 profiler. They're made by the same company. This one is twice as expensive as the Color Monkey, and if you're going to go to the trouble of actually building these things or using these things, you might as well go for the good one. Make sense? Okay, so when you get this, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, it's called the I1 profiler. So it's I like me, one O-N-E profiler. So when you pick this thing up, it's got this. This is referred. They call this a puck. That's what they refer to it as being. And there'll also be a thumb drive in the same little thing that's got the software that runs this. Okay, so simply load the software. Again, the software is free. You're not stealing anything. You load the software onto your computer, and you need to do this to, what we're going to do is we're going to do two things with this. The first thing is you're going to try to calibrate your monitor to a standard. And then the second thing you're going to try to do to this is you're going to actually then profile it. So you remember that illustration that I had up on the board earlier where it was like, we're trying to build a table that not only spots what the bias is, but neutralizes the bias of my monitor, that eliminates the discrepancies or the deficiencies in my monitor. That's what we're trying to do here. It's exactly what we did with the first profile we built for the camera. Make sense? So the software for this is actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to quit out of this part right now. So again, what we're building now is this profile right here. So we've already got this guy. We're good to go on this. It's this one we're going to go after right now. So to use it, the software that runs it is called I1 Profiler. And again, that's what's going to be on that thumb drive that you'll install. So I'm going to pick I1 Profiler. You'll see that there's two programs in here. One's just called I1 Profiler. The other is I1 Profiler Tray. I've never used Tray. Nobody ever uses it. I don't know why they keep putting this out. I don't really know what it does. But anyway, everything runs off this first one. So just make sure that this is the one you launch. And as a matter of fact, before you launch it, this is just experience tells me this. You want to plug this thing in before you launch the software, because what's going to happen is the software is going to look for this thing. It's going to look for a piece of hardware, and if there's nothing plugged in, it can get confused. And the worst of the confusion, what ends up happening is we're going to go through this entire process to build the profile, calibrate our monitor. You'll get to the very end to save it in your program, and the program will crash. So don't do that. Plug this thing in first, and then double-click on it to launch it. And this is the screen that comes up. And you will see that over here on the left-hand side that you can profile a huge number of things. You can profile displays, which is what we're going to do. You can also profile projectors, so I could profile that guy right there. You can do printers, which we're going to do. That's the last step of what we do today before we actually do some printing. And you can also profile scanners. So all of these things can be profiled. Some of these take different hardware. So for instance, you cannot use this small puck right here to do a print. I'll show you the thing that you need to get to do the print, but this works perfect to actually do your monitor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Display Profiling right here, and a screen comes, actually I take that back. Let me go back really quickly just to make sure. There's one thing I missed on here, sorry. You'll see that there, before we do any of this, before I click on any of this, there is a basic button at the top and an advanced. Go ahead and pick the basic button. It gives us everything that we actually want to do in all of this, okay? So, and then before I do this, I realize there's a couple other things we need to do here first. So, what's going to happen in here when I actually do this thing is it's going to, again, do exactly the same, similar thing, whatever. It's going to start flashing tone and color on my screen, and this hardware puck is going to measure that and build the table that is the discrepancy between the two. Does that make sense? However, there's another thing that it's going to do here. So What controls the black point of my computer? First thing we talked about today.
The reflective space in an environment.
The environment. So what controls the white point? Brightness. The brightness of your screen. This is what controls the dynamic range of your screen. The environment controls how black your screen is. Your brightness controls how light, or the brightness part of your screen, right? Unfortunately, in the Macintosh world, so most of you guys are, that's not Mac, is that? Oh, it is? It's just camoed pretty well? I like that. I like that. It doesn't matter. I'm just got to show you guys that this is a problem that has come up with. Apple never really designed their stuff to be doing the kind of work that we are doing. They designed stuff so that people could put the pictures of their family on their computer, and it all looks really great. It all looks really hyper-saturated and really sharp and contrasty and really beautiful pictures, but that is useless to us. That does not help us at all. So we need to shut off a huge number of things that Apple does to fuck up your image here. So to do that, and I want everybody to do this with me, you can always revert this back. It is in a PDF that I've given you about how to calibrate your monitor, but it'll also be in the video recording right here. So I want to start with this part first. If you come up to the Apple menu, the little thing that looks like the Apple, and click on that, and come down to System Preferences, there's a number of things in here we have to change right off the get-go. And the first one we're going to actually do is click on Displays. So again, this is an Apple-wide thing, and it's how it's controlling displays. I'm going to click on Displays. And in my case, I come up, I've got two screens, because one of my screens is actually for this projector up here. This is the one, though, that is for my built-in Retina display. This is my guy right here. The first thing that you need to do is uncheck this Automatic Adjust Brightness. We are going to set the brightness on our computer. If you have automatically adjust brightness turned on, what happens is that your computer uses the camera in your computer to measure the ambient light in the room. And the darker this room gets, the darker it makes your screen. The lighter the room gets, the lighter it makes your screen. That completely defeats profiling this. We need to lock this variable down. This is not, if you've got a wandering screen that is just, it's traveling all over the place, you're doomed. You can't, there's no way that you can set up anything legitimate on this if it's changing every single time the light in the room changes. So you have got to turn that guy off. Depending on the version of software you're using, you may or may not have this night shift. You need to click on night shift right here, and you also need to turn this off. What night shift does is it actually takes your computer, and as the day progresses, it does, exactly. It'll actually take away blue light as the night gets, so your computer gets actually a warmer color temperature as the day goes on. Again, that defeats the entire purpose of a profile. You are introducing a random color into your screen. So you have got to turn this guy off as well. The next things we need to do, if you click on this thing that looks like it's just a whole series of dots, you can get back to the other stuff that we need to do. Click on Energy Saver. In Energy Saver, if you unplug your computer right now, you will actually see that there is, when you are in battery state, there is Enable Power Nap when on battery power. What this thing will do, and this thing right above it, the slightly dim the display when on battery power, you need to turn both of those off. This slightly dim when you are in battery power means the minute I unplug this thing, if that's turned on, my screen just got darker. Again, that is a variable that you have got to shut off because you need your computer to always be doing and showing you the exact same thing, and all of these things will actually screw all of that up. So then everybody thinks, okay, well that's got to be it. There can't be any more, but there is. So what? Yep. Are you good? Oh, sorry. Yeah, here. So this. Uncheck this and uncheck the power nap as well. Okay, so then again, back to clicking on to get back to the rest of the guys. There's two last things that we need to do, and they're in a really weird place, but it's right down here under Accessibility. You need to click on Accessibility. It'll open this up, and then you'll see on your left-hand side, you will actually have a thing for Display. You want to click on Display, and here in Display, this is critical. you need to have this display contrast set at normal. If this gets changed on any level, your computer is worthless. You might as well throw it out. Again, you can change the contrast doing this, but it is worthless. Your profile will be worthless. Pretty much everything you see will also be worthless as well. You also want to make sure that increased contrast is not checked and that reduced transparency is checked. What reduced transparency does is that I think you've probably seen that behavior where you can sort of see if you've got one screen up, you can sort of see through it a little bit. The problem with that is that will allow color to come through into your image from whatever color is behind your screen, which contaminates the color of your image. Again, huge problem. You can't trust your screen or what you're seeing on that. So those are the setups that we actually need to do here in the Apple part. So then back into the i1 Profiler software right here. Again, click Basic right here. You don't need to go into the advanced mode. If you're really geek about this stuff, you can go into advanced mode. But again, everything that we need to do in this room for the level of work you guys need to be doing, you can do in Basic, and it's a little less confusing. So I am going to click on Display Profiler to actually do this, and this window will pop up. And you'll see in my case, I've actually got two possibilities. Again, my computer is recognizing that I'm connected to this projector, and that's what this PT53, what this I'm dyslexic. So this, I look at this PT53, no, there's a DW before that part, but yeah, anyway, that's the projector. What I want is this, my color LCD screen. So this is what I'm actually going on. In this drop-down menu, you want to leave this at your default. However, if you take a look at it, you'll see if you were lucky enough, if Apple eventually comes out with an OLED laptop, then this would be an option that you could change it to. But for right now, the laptops that you guys are all working on, whatever you could buy, whatever is going to be this RGB LED, and it will pick it by default. This white point, this is critical that you set this correctly. So at white point, you want to set this at D65. This stands for daylight 6500 degrees Kelvin. That is the standard for all monitors, no matter what you are doing. In the old days, D65 was this. It's always been the standard in Europe. In the United States, it was D50 for a while, but that was because people were trying to simulate print. Pretty much everybody has gotten, well, not pretty much, everybody has gotten away from that. D65 is considered to be the standard. And what we're talking about here is white point, and what D65 really is referring to is this. It's this color temperature slider right here. It's not tint, it's this guy right here. So as we change color temperature, you can make things warmer or cooler. What we're trying to do is find the exact spot in the middle between warming and cooling to give us a neutral white point. That's exactly what we're talking about here, and it is D65. So you will always set this at D65 in that software. So again, D65. In terms of the luminance that actually comes down here, this is set, this is the brightness of your screen. That's what we are setting right here. And there is a drop-down menu here. You can actually pick these presets, or you can do a custom one. You do not want to do a native measure here. What you want to pick here is somewhere between 120 candelas per square meter and 140. That's what you're looking for here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this 120. You'll see we're going to actually be able to measure this stuff out in just a second. So that's basically what's going on in here. So I'm going to pick this 120 candelas per square meter part right here. The next thing down, gamma. This again, you want to leave this tone curve at its at standard and a gamma of 2.2. What this is the contrast of your computer screen. That's what we are controlling here. 2.2 is considered the standard that you want to be working on. If you were only going to work on print, try to emulate print stuff on your screen forevermore, you might, again, in the old days, there were people who would drop this down to a 1.8. That would be considered something you would not want to get into at all. Just leave it at 2.2. These are considered to be the standards all over the world now. And again, unless you have some really compelling reason, you want to leave this part here. If it wasn't enough that Apple wants to automatically adjust the brightness of your profile based on the ambient light, they also give you the option to do it right here. You want to make sure that this is unchecked. Again, in this case, do any of you guys have covers over the camera on your computer? Talk about really fucking this up, because then what happens is that you say, I want to adjust the brightness based on my camera, but then you block your camera, which makes the computer feel, you could be sitting out on the corner in broad daylight, your computer thinks it's completely black and it will adjust it. So it's a nightmare to have. You do not want anything happening to your computer. You want to shut all that down. So you want to make sure that this is turned off. By the way, I'm right there with you. I have a cover on my camera, whatever. Have you ever seen, I was in a room, I was in a seminar full of people and and it was all about security. Because they said, just turn your computer on. Everybody turned their computer on. And there was a guy who had a computer on screen just like this. And he went around the room one by one and turned on people's cameras remotely. And it showed your face. And all of a sudden, your face is up there on the screen, gigantic. And it's like, what? It's so wrong. It's so wrong. Anyway, nonetheless, once you get this set, we're ready to roll on this. So again, I've got my hardware is plugged in. I'm going to click on Next. And you'll see up here, sometimes you lose this. Sometimes if this screen is too small, it'll look like this or something like this, you just need to make sure that this thing is big enough. You'll see that there's help over here along that describes a lot of stuff that's going on in this right here. You can actually make this screen a little bit more narrow, which then opens up this, which is what we really want. We need to be able to see this guy right here, and we need to be able to see the other stuff that's going on in here. Now, if you were connected to a state-of-the-art, is anybody here working on an external monitor, attaching your computer to an external monitor? If you are, and it's a very high-end monitor, that's what this whole automatic display control is all about. There are monitors like the Zios, the BenQs, that kind of stuff, whatever, that have hardware calibration built into them. You would then let that control this, but all the laptops that you guys are working on, if you have an iMac, all of that stuff, you do not pick this top ADC. You pick this one underneath, the Adjust Brightness, Contrast, and RGB Gains manually. That's what we're going to use to set our screen to actually do this. And then finally, with this thing set up just like this, you click on Start Measurement. You see these colors right here? This is what it's going to be flashed onto my screen. My computer then, this hardware is going to try to measure them, and we'll see the before and after, we'll see the differences. Does that make sense what's going on here? Again, it's that same process. You know, the thing is that at a certain stage of the game, you're like, fuck, Versa, I get this. I understand what you're doing here, whatever. But if you really get your head around that and grab this, then you will understand how important this is, and you will continue to do it. So I'm going to click on Start Measure. And it walks you through every bit of this like a child. I'll show you what it means, what I mean by that. So it'll show you this little picture right here, and this thing will start blinking like crazy. It starts to do this. And what it's telling you is this I1, this puck, has a protective cover on it. So you lift up this part and you rotate it around, and it reveals this clear lens, and that's what actually does the measuring on your screen. Okay, you don't measure through the frosted part, you measure through this clear part right here. That's what that whole thing was about. Then it tells you that it's best practice to tilt your screen back because you want this puck to rest square against you want it to be solid against your screen. If your screen is sitting perfectly upright, the puck can actually drift off of your screen, which will cause a problem. You do this to ensure contact on it. Does that make sense? Then there is a counterweight on the back of this puck. This counterweight moves up and down. It slides up and down this cord. And you just do that so that when you put this on your screen like this, that weight hangs off the back and it holds this whole thing in place. Does that make sense what's going on? If you need to stand up and come over and take a look here, you're more than welcome to do that. So I'm going to hit OK. I've tilted my screen back. And then the next thing I'm going to do is simply click on the next button. Again, it walks you through that. It says, please hang the device in the center and press next. The directions on this are actually pretty well done. Typically, if I was going to do this, I do this once a week at least. I would probably clean my screen before I did this, especially as a lecturer. I tend to spit all over my screen a lot. So, okay. So this is the only hyper janky thing I'm going to show you guys today, and it's just janky, and that's all I can tell you, and I apologize for this. I'm going to show you the fuck up, and I'm going to show you the fix for it and how we get around this, but what you can see right here right now is this. I have got a target white. This is my brightness. I've got a target luminance right now of 120. That's what I said I wanted. I set that up. And I told you guys, you want to be somewhere between 120 and 140. That's your target in here. If you look at the measured white luminance on mine, mine says 136 because I actually have calibrated this thing recently, and that's where it ends up being set. To change the brightness of your monitor, it's the two little buttons at the very top of your keyboard. It's the one that looks like a little sun and the one that looks like the big sun. So do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So it's how you change the brightness of your keyboard. This is one of the poorest designs that Apple does, is this brightness control. Because the problem is that I'm going to try to get closer to 120, so I'm going to hit the make it darker thing, and you just hit 1, and this puck will remeasure. And you can see now, when I hit 1 down, it went down to a 109. That is now too dark. Again, these are the things that are being measured right here, and this is my target right here. Is that making sense to everyone? So then I'm going to hit the bright one to go up 1, and you can see this is going back to the 136. So it's not giving me, I'd like to be closer if I can be closer. But again, that whole control, that just seems really, I click on the little sun thing. That's how, I mean, I've got a $300 calibrator here, and I've got a $5,000 computer, and I'm clicking on the sun. Really? You can get a finer control on this. If you hold down the Option and, I think it's Option Command. Let me see here really quickly. Option Command, and then hit the down guy. Let's try Shift Option, down guy. Yep, it's Shift Option. If you do Shift Option instead of just the brightness and the darkness slider, if you add Shift Option to that, it will do it in tenths of a step. So instead of doing one big leap, you get a tenth of that leap. And you can see I went from a 139 down to a 130. If I click that one more time, I go down to a 123. And I'm probably not going to get any closer to that. However, there is a problem with this now, and the problem is this. You can leave your computer, the brightness, untouched forevermore if that's what you want to do, but all of us change the brightness of our computer. It's late at night, you're trying to see your porn a little bit better, and so you crank up the brightness, but then that screws up your profile, and you need to know how to get back to where we were. How do you know where we were, right? There's no record of this. So this is what you have to do. You take out your phone. You actually pick the camera on your phone. You hold your thumb on the little volume button so that it'll take a picture of this really quickly. You hold down the Shift and the Option to get just that one small increment. You hit the dot to bring it up to make it too bright. Then you hit the one down to make it, and you shoot a picture of your screen really quick while that readout is on there. Okay. Yeah. So, no, I know, believe me, I realize. Here's the problem. My screen is set perfectly right now, but how many, if you look at the brightness slider on here, there's a series of little dots on it. So here, I'm going to take it up brighter. See the little number of dots on the bottom? I need to know how many those are. I can't count that quick. I couldn't count that quick if it stayed up for twice that amount of time, right? So what I want to do is I want to shoot a picture of that when it's correct. So right now it's not correct. Right now I'm at a 136. So again, I'm going to hold down my Shift Option, click down 1. That's it now, a 130. I'm going to hit one more time down. That's my 123. That's about as close as I can get. However, I need to make it wrong to then set it back here to be correct to photograph it. Because right now, if I change it, if I hit the make it brighter one and shoot a picture of that, that's the wrong one. That's the setting that will give me 130. So again, I'm ready to, oops, I do not want to shoot a picture of me. All right, so I'm ready to go on this, holding down the shift and the option, hit the down guy and shoot a picture of my screen. And hopefully I grabbed it.
I think you could probably get away with screenshotting it.
If you can do a screenshot that quick, anything that you can do. So you can look at my phone right here. That's what I just shot a picture of. And so now I can go in here and count the setting, the number of those little squares that are lit up so that I know what brightness I need to set my computer at. I know a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll simply count up the number of these and they'll write down just the number on a Post-it note or on a piece of tape and just put it on your computer and say, this is the brightness setting that you need to make your monitor be correct. Because the problem that we are gotten, how many people in this room, when you actually go to do your printouts, your prints are too dark? It happens to everybody, right? Is that what happens to you guys, or are you not? Is that not your problem? Prints too dark? It's a classic. Why are your prints too dark? Because your screen is too bright. Your screen is so bright, you go into your software and you make it darker so that your screen looks correct. The problem is not in the file. The problem is in your screen. Your screen is too bright. So with your screen now correct, your prints will not be too dark because you will not be trying to make them darker so they look good on a screen that's too bright. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is now set correctly for my luminance. That's the brightness. I'm going to simply hit next again. And now it's going to go through 3 steps of this. And the first step that it's going to do right now is it's trying to come up with the D65, the color temperature that I said that I wanted, and it's also trying to give me the contrast that I wanted, that 2.2 gamma, and my brightness has already been set. So the first job it's trying to do right now is neutralize my screen to a D65 and give me that contrast setting, that 2.2 that I want. So that's the first round that it's going to do. Then it's going to do a second pass of this, and the second pass is going to be to build that table that we were just talking about earlier, to measure the discrepancies of my screen. Okay, he wanted to get here, but now let's talk about color. Let's talk about the discrepancies between that. If it's asking for a pure 255 red and your screen's giving you a 225 red, that is a problem, and it's going to build that table to get rid of that bias or that lie or that discrepancy. Does that make sense? And then finally, it's going to do a third pass of that to verify that the changes that it just made are working. And if you get an error message that says, sorry, this didn't work, then you need to follow what those error messages are. It may tell you, and I've seen this happen before, your screen is too old, it's never going to achieve what you need to do, and at that stage of the game, you get to buy a new computer. It's either that or you accept the fact that your shit lies to you and you just have no hope. So I'm trying to get you guys away from fucking viewing filters circa 1950. Kodak doesn't even exist anymore. Oh, that's just so wrong. That's just so wrong on so many levels. I want you guys looking at a screen, making a judgment. Okay, my screen, I feel like my screen's not lying to me. My image is too warm, or my image is too cool, or my image has got a green bias to it, or a green cast to it, or that. I want you looking at that and saying, I'm going to fix that. And when that screen looks great to you, you print out, you stick it up on the wall, everybody goes, how'd you do that? And you're like, see ya. You know, I'm going to the bar drinking. You got good luck. Hang out at the lab all you want. Here are the viewing filters. Go check that out. Good luck with that one. You know, and there's no relationship between the viewing filters and your screen. It's not like if you put on and you say, okay, that's a 5cc too much red. How does that translate to a curve? I mean, okay, I know it's a little too red, or it's, well, anyway, you get where this is all going. I don't want you guys printing like that. I do. I don't do test prints. I do. My first print, 99% of the time, is my final print. Like I said, occasionally I'll spot something that says to me, oh, And it's, once you see it, you say, you go back and look at your screen, you can see it in your screen, and then you go, okay, I'm in a hurry, I missed that, I ignored that, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But again, if I can get you guys to that point, then if your screen looks right, you'll be happy. Are we good on that? Do you guys have enough time in your life for anything? No, I mean, you know what I mean. I don't have enough time in my life to do any, I do a lot of things. But I'm just saying, to waste time trying to just hope that you bump into color, decent color, whatever, is horrible. You are doomed to be just hours and hours and hours in that lab, and that's just no fun. So you can see right now, it's going through the verification. That's what it's saying at the very bottom. It's running through this, and it's trying to tell me how good of a job it actually did. Did it construct that table correctly? Are we good? Are we okay on this part? Does that sort of make sense? And then I'm going to show you guys the before and after. So the first thing you need to do is calibrate your camera if you are shooting digital. If you're not, that part's off. We'll deal with the film part if you're just doing film. Your second part is to calibrate your monitor. So how often do you calibrate your monitor? So you'll see this little screen comes up, and again, it's going to say to you, okay, we're good here. You can now take it off of your screen, and please turn the little protective cover back around again, because you don't want that lens to get dirty. And the minute it puts back on like that, it recognizes that this has actually happened. It says, set this thing down by your computer. This is my favorite image right there, the one that actually is, okay, it's sitting next to my computer, and then click on next. It says measurement successful was completed. Do you want to save these for future use? If you do, you want to say next to that. And that's just the color sync utility. It's not this part. So I'm going to simply say OK to this. Look at this table. What this table is showing you is the color that is in the top left-hand part right here is the color that was asked for. The part on the bottom is the color my monitor actually gave it. Now, they're off pretty serious here in the reds. There's actually relatively close in these lighter greens. The darker greens actually get much, much worse. But look at the colors that are down in here. Look at some of the shit that's actually happening down in here. This is not as bad as I've seen a lot of them, but you can see there's colors here, asked for, given, asked for, given, asked for, given, asked for, given. Look at this. The tones, especially here down in my 3/4 and shadow areas right here, are radically off. All of this has now been corrected. How can you color correct if this is what's happening to your file? If your file is asking for these before numbers and your screen is showing you these after numbers, you may as well turn the color off on your screen. It doesn't matter. You're guessing. You're just looking at the print and making a judgment. You don't even have to see the screen in color if this is how bad it is. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. I'm going to hit next because it's actually what I want it to be. However, I need to save this profile, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to come over here and hit next. And I can save it. And the thing that you want to do is you, again, just like we did with our profile for our camera, you need something that's meaningful on this. Do not call it color LCD. That doesn't mean anything. You need to identify it as your computer. So for me, I'm going to actually rename this MacBook Pro MBP _VER for Verser. And I'm going to leave the date in here. So it is on the 13th of September 2009. Is that the way your dating should be?
Well, in China, we do months, dates, and years.
That's just as bad as what they do here in the US,
Oh.
right? So let's say, for instance, this was not the 13th of September. Let's say this was the 5th of September. That would say 0509. Would you have any idea what the date was?
I think you can put the year first.
You always put the year first, followed by the month, followed by the day. So I'm going to change this, and it would be 2019_09_13. Again, you always start at the biggest and go to your smallest here. It's only going to let me put it in the user level. That'll be fine. If you want to be reminded that you need to do this often, you click on this drop-down menu. You can set a reminder to tell you in a week or two that you need to do this again.
You mean like use this machine again?
Yep.
Oh.
and then you simply click on Save Profile.
What did you just say? I just missed that last part. What did you say?
She said it's going to remind you to use this guy again. And I said, yes, that's exactly what happens.
After you calibrate it, why would it be uncalibrated?
So I'm going to show you this really quick. I need all of you guys to stand up and come over here really quick, just to show you what's going on. So I'm going to quit this right now. This thing has done its job. This thing has now been calibrated to D65. It's been set up. It's been profiled. This is as good as this thing is going to get for me. So I'm going to quit my i1 profile. The reason you need to look at this is that when I show this to you on the screen, it's going to show you that projector there. The only place you can see the screen change is here. Does that sort of make sense? All right, so I'm going to go into the Finder just so we have something a little bit more to look at. I'm going to hide everybody else. Yeah, so this will give you a much better indication of this. So, again, to make sure that the profile is the correct one and then it's loaded, come up here to the top, Apple menu, System Preferences. This opens up. Go to Displays, and then go to Color. We did all of these other things before. Display, this first part right here, set your resolution. Arrangement is because I've got two things. It's where the menus, that's what arrangement's about. Night shift we already talked about, but color is where this whole thing resides. And you can see it's been, this guy right here was actually set, this MacBook Pro _Versa _ 2019-0913. That's it, right? This is now color calibrated in the profile. This, watch what happens. I'm going to show you what Apple ships. This is what you guys have been working with. So this is what Apple ships. This is profiled and corrected. How can you do color correction on your files when there is this much a discrepancy between what is actually, look at this, look how bright and how this has got a ton of red in it and it's got a ton of blue in it, both. And this is all wrong, and this is how you guys have been looking at this, trying to color correct. Wow. Impossible. Not even remotely possible. This is, again, color balanced and color correct.
Wow. Oh.
So, the reminder thing, how often should you do that? You guys know who Pixar is? Disney Pixar, you know, Toy Story, all of those guys, whatever. If you do, all their monitors are monitored. That's a really weird way of saying that. If you do not calibrate your monitor every single morning, you're automatically fired. They don't even give you an option. If you do not do it first thing in the morning, they call you up and they let you go. And the reason they do that is because if there is a mistake for them that's introduced at one point in that whole chain, that just gets compounded all the way down the line, and all of a sudden they've sent something out to a rendering farm that has taken, you know, a month to render, is only costing them $100 million to do it, and there's an error in there because somebody didn't calibrate their monitor. They don't tolerate it on any level. And so, how often should you guys calibrate your monitor? Realistically, right? You don't need a calibrated monitor to type email. You don't need one to answer your, you know, to do any of that kind of work, whatever. When you don't need, if you do, or you're a person who does compositing work and that kind of stuff, whatever, you don't even really need it to be for that. But if the point where you reach in your process where you're saying, I want to do color critical work and tonal critical work, you have got to do this in the morning.
Wait, but the thing is, you already said it, then can't you just use the same profile again?
No, because this will drift. These things get older, just like all of us. They do. It'll change over time. Every day that's important. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've gotten through that part. Are there questions about this? Are we okay on this part? Yeah. Okay. So then I'm going to show you the final on this triad, and then we're going to actually look at your files, and we can spend the rest of the time. If you want to go upstairs and actually try to do a printer part, whatever, but I've got to get you through the last part of this. How many of you guys in this room are interested in printing on what we would consider to be non-conventional media? How many people, so the printer upstairs that you guys use, those are Epson printers. They're the 8000 series, right? How many of you guys are willing to only use Epson medium?
Like the paper?
Yeah.
I'd like to try the thing.
Of course you would, right? Because Epson media sucks. There's much better media out there, right? Anybody in this room have any desire to print on non-conventional media? I've had people print on tinfoil. There was a girl in the grad program who was actually in my retouching class 3 or 4 years ago that was printing on skin. Pig skin. Yeah. They used to have printers here that they dedicated only to basically being able to fuck up. I don't know really where that whole process stands right now, but you guys being in the grad program, you've got more latitude than the undergrad program at large, with good reason. Because if you all of a sudden say to 300 people, well, yeah, you can start running, pigskin through this printer or whatever, a lot of stuff gets ruined really quickly. Where with you guys in a smaller group like that, you can sort of say, okay, well, yeah, let's contain it to this one printer or do something like that. So they used to, I don't know really what the story is now in terms of the printers that they've got, how bad you can get with some of that stuff. But I've seen people profile wood. I've seen people profile every single media that you could get through, any kind of paper. What most people find they end up doing is that you'll find a paper texture or surface that you really love that comes from a third party, like a Moab or a Red River or Hahnemule or Canson or all of those people. And all of those companies, for the most part, will have generic profiles to use to run their media through a given printer, but they are generic and they are just as bad as the CAN profile that we looked at Adobe provides for your camera model, the one for your camera sensor. And you saw how off of those were. Those were horrible, right? The girl sweater, how much color could that possibly change? So this is going to be the final part of the process, and it's this guy right down here. So again, just to revisit this. So what we've done now is we've built the input part of all of this. We've built the output part to our monitors. So if you were to do this, if everybody in this room were to do this, calibrate and their monitors right now, all of our monitors would show the same file. They would look identical. We could put all of our monitors right next to one another, and they would all appear identical, which is unbelievable, but that's how it works. Does that make sense? But realize this, just like the camera part, this profile functions for my computer alone. If you guys had a version of my exact computer, another MacBook 13-inch, made by this year, made right after this one was made, you couldn't use my profile. It's not going to describe the discrepancies of your monitor because every single device is unique. Are we good on that part? Okay, so this is the last part we need to do, is the custom printer profile part. And again, the reason you want to do this is that even if you are using Epson media in an Epson printer, their CAN profile is not going to be anywhere near as good as a truly specific one that was made exactly for that media and that printer. Are we good on that part? All right, so to do this, it is the same software that we've used before, the one that we were just working in, which I've quit, so I'm going to open it up again. Guys, I know this is a lot, and it seems a whole lot of basic stuff, and the list of stuff that Kelly wanted me to get through to you guys is exhaustive, but it's way beyond the level of this part right now. Personally, I believe if you get this part locked down, it will change so much of your life that this is so much more critical than showing you how to put it. So that doesn't mean I'm unwilling to meet again, that we can't extend this or whatever, blah, blah, blah. We'll see where we get. But getting through this part, are you guys okay with this part so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So at any rate, in this next version, what we're going to do is we're not going to do our projector. We want to actually do a printer profiling. So I'm going to walk you through this, and then I'm going to show you. I'm going to move my computer over here to actually do the measurement part because I've got to spread out a little bit. But I want to walk you through the steps of doing this because this is what you would do to actually do media that already has a profile for it, but media that you want to, again, to do a Canson paper or a Hahnemule paper in a Canon printer or whatever the combo is. So this is how you would ultimately do it. You pick on printer profiling and a thing will drop out, and the first thing that actually happens here is you realize that you have got to have the print driver that you want to profile loaded in your system. So what that means is, have you guys ever, is everybody in here installed a print driver? Well, I'll show you what it looks like, and I'm actually going to install one, but we've got to go up and connect to your printer upstairs because I was going to install the print drivers for the P8000, the one that you have in the Grad print room, but you have to be connected to it in order to actually install the driver. And even though I could get the software to do it, it wouldn't let me do it because it's asking, where's the printer, where's the printer, where's the printer? So in most cases, you want to be connected. Once you are connected, if you click on this drop-down menu, go to System Preferences, come over here to Add Scanners and Printers. You would click on this little button down here to actually add it, and it's going to go through and it's going to look for all of the printers that would be connected. And you would find, in my case, you'll see, we'll go upstairs and do it because I do want to have the drivers and the profiles for that for the P8000 here. But anyway, this is where you would go do it, and you would then simply click on the printer that it found, and it will load the drivers for you. And
you have to be connected, and then it will pull the drivers.
what it does is it looks at the printer that's connected, and then this software actually goes up to Apple's server and it finds the software for that printer and it downloads it. You can also download the software direct from Epson. I'll show you guys how to do all of that. Well, here, I'll show you how to do that right now because, again, we should talk about this. So if it doesn't work this way, what I just showed you, this is the other thing you do. Go out to just a regular browser. You guys can do this with me because, again, just muscle memory. I'm going to do a brand new window in here, and I'm going to do Epson P8000 driver and say OK. It'll take me to Epson's website right here. So it's this standard SureColor series. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to take me to the page that deals with all of the stuff for this printer that's sitting right here. And in this printer right here, I'm going to click on Downloads. And in the downloads, it actually looks at the software that I've got, so it knows that this is the version of Macintosh that I'm running, because different versions of system software require different versions of these drivers. And in this case, it's sitting right here, so it knows the one that I've got. If it didn't, you would simply click on this drop-down menu and pick the version that you wanted to do this for, but this is the one that I'm running. And then if you click on this plus to go down for drivers, these are the different options that I've got. I can do the drivers and utility combo package, which is what I would suggest you do, because this will also load the canned ICC profiles, which in some cases, if you don't have a profile, in some cases these will actually, well, they work better than nothing at all. That's just the way I'll leave it. Other than that, you would just download the print driver by itself. Once you do that and you double click on it, it looks like this. This is the Canon software. I just downloaded this last night, exactly the thing I just showed you. And if you double click on this guy, it opens up and it's going to try to walk me through this whole process. But again, I get to the point where it says, how do you connect to your printer? Do you connect via FireWire or whatever, blah, blah, blah. You'll see it won't let me go any further. So we will hold this part of it till we can get upstairs and connect to a printer, and then we'll go through this part of it. Does that make sense? Yes. Shoot.
You guys should all download the drivers to your computers because sometimes the printers have, in the lab, we have problems with the computers printing, and then you can use your laptop to actually do the printing.
Well, not only that, but if you're going to all the hassle of editing on your laptop and all that kind of stuff, whatever, why do you want to copy that to a hard drive? Because then you open that up in a different version of Photoshop, and if that different version of Photoshop does not have your custom camera profile, it's gone. You lose that. And so, no, there's a whole cornucopia of reasons about keeping your universe, and not relying on this other stuff. But that's a great point. It's a great point. You're just better off. If there's a problem, then you fix the problem in your system. You're not fixing problem after problem because you're on different computer after different computer. Yeah. All right, so at any rate, I'm going to jump out of this really quickly because I can't get all the way through that. I'm going to go back to where we were. So once you get the driver downloaded, in this drop-down menu, you will actually get the option to load that printer that you're trying to load. So I'm going to emulate. I'm going to do mine based on let me see, I've got a couple of targets here, and I can't remember what I printed them out on. So I'm going to pick the same target. I'm going to pick the same one. So let me just look at this really quickly. Yeah, I've got some for Yeah, I've got for the P800. Yeah. So I've got a set of targets that have been printed out for a Canon P800. So again, this process would be exactly the same. You would just pick the printer that you want to be doing your profiling of. So I'm going to pick the Canon P800. I'm sorry, the Epson P800. And I hope I've got that on here. Yep, it's this guy right here. So that's the SC, it's the baby brother of the big one that you guys got up here. Yours is an 8000, this is an 800. So I'm going to pick that guy, and you'll see right here it says that it is an RGB printer, and however you think it's not. It's a CMYK printer, but no, that's really not true. The driver that, that you have for all Epson printers, Canon printers is the same thing, whatever. They're all basically expecting RGB data. You don't convert a file to CMYK before you send it to be printed. You send them an RGB file. That's why this is considered an RGB printer, even though it uses those inks. In the paper select size right down here, we need to pick the target size that we are going to use first. So I don't know why. This is one of the things that drives me absolutely insane when it comes to user interface. You've got to pick the size of your target first before you can pick anything else. So in this drop-down menu, you have three options. You have a small, medium, and large. The small target is this is what a target looks like. It's a series of color patches. That's all it looks like. The small target is 400 patches. The medium target is 800, and the big target is 1600. If you're going to go to all this hassle, you should do the 1600 guy. I'm just saying, to do a 1600 patch target at its most extreme measurement perfection method takes about 10 minutes. So that's what we're really talking about here. Do you really want to cut that 10-minute down to only 5 minutes, but have a profile that's only half as good? Make sense? So this is an 800 patch target, so I'm going to leave it on here. And the only reason I've got this 800 patch is that I don't want you guys to watch me measure all 1600. This just goes much faster. But this is for demo only. In your case, you would pick this large target. I'm just telling you that's what you would want to pick. In my case, I'm going to leave it on the medium target because this software is going to expect this group. Make sense? Then in the paper size drop down right here, if you print on a Super B piece of paper, which is a 13 by 19 piece of paper, you can print the entire 1600 patches of a large target on a single piece of paper. However, if you don't have that size paper, so for instance, this is 8.5 by 11, it simply will break your target up and print it out on multiple pages of this. So you can see, I can set in my drop-down menu here. On my paper size here, I'm going to leave it as letter, and it's going to say, okay, well, on a letter size that you're actually going to do that in, actually, that's not letter size. Right here, 8.5 by 11. In this case, it's going to actually take 2 sheets of paper to print this out. You'll see it says up here, page 1 of 2 of 2. Does that sort of make sense? Are we good on this part? And then finally, you can leave the patch layout at its default and this unit at inches. This doesn't really impact us at all. However, and this is a biggie, you want to do your printing from this program. It is possible to save these targets and to print them out of a different program. The problem with this is that what I'm trying to do is have all color adjustments removed. I need to measure the native response of my printer. So no matter how hard you try, you cannot completely shut off color correction in Photoshop. If you open these targets in Photoshop, it will apply a layer of color correction no matter what you do to shut it off. It's so bad, Adobe actually created a separate program just to print color targets for people because this was driving everybody crazy. So I'm just telling you, this software is free. You can download it, keep it on your computer. You want to do the printing from this program because it shuts off all color correction. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit print, and I'll see how far this actually lets me get into this. At a certain point, it's going to know I'm not connected to this printer, but these things matter. So in the drop-down for your printer right here, you do want to select the printer that we just picked, and in my case, it is that P800. It's this guy right here. This is the tricky part though, because this is where, if you guys really need to get a handle on your printing, this is the next place where most of the problems are going to happen, or in what I'm going to show you right now. So in the default settings, you can leave this. In the paper size, you would again want to set it. I picked US letter, so that part is what I wanted, but this is where it gets dicey. In this drop-down menu for layout, under layout right here, you want to come down to printer settings, and what you set up here in printer settings is critical, because what you've got to figure out is what you're going to actually set for your piece of paper, what your piece of paper really is. Now the problem with this is that all of these options are defined in terms of Epson paper, because this is an Epson printer and this is Epson software. It looks like it's Apple software, but it is not. This is Epson software. They write this driver. So all the options that it's going to give it is for their paper. It's not a problem. What you need to decide though is what is the closest you can get to this kind of paper. So in this particular paper right here, this is a central, I did this for, you guys know Paul D'Amato, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I did these profiles for Paul. He found a paper, it's central camera, it's a luster surface. It's actually made, I think, by Inkjet Press. I think that's who's making their paper, I'm not sure. But at any rate, it's cheaper than their version. So, and he said, you know, I've been getting good results with this stuff, whatever. And I said, would you like me to make a profile for you? And he goes, that would be great. So I generated this profile. I printed this out on a P800 in the digital lab on that paper, but all of this matters. So in my settings here, what I said was I do want it to be sheet fed. In the case of you guys, you could be doing, especially with that 8000 series, most of what you're going to be doing is roll, but you can still do sheets there as well. But again, this is just the feed part of it. But in the media type, this is critical. And if you screw this up, your profile is worthless. And the reason this is, I'm going to do the drop-down menu right here. You can see I've got a photo paper right here, and in the case of this, because it was a luster paper, I picked a media setting of ultra premium photo paper luster. This is the one that I picked to build this profile. Now, in some cases, you'll see that there are other possible options that we could have had. So let's say, for instance, instead of it being a luster, let's say it was a matte paper. You could have picked ultra premium presentation matte, or you could have picked presentation paper matte. It doesn't matter which one of these you pick. So let's say I was going to do an Entrada matte paper. I would have to pick one of these mattes. It doesn't really matter which one I pick as much as that I need to make that notation for the profile, because I have got to use that media setting. The one that I use to make the profile is the one that I need to use to do the printing. If I made the profile using ultra premium presentation matte, but then picked presentation paper matte to do the printing, the profile is no longer valid. So whatever you use to make the profile is what you use to need to do the printing. So it's got to be noted in your profile. Does that make sense? Yeah. But in the case of this, it was, again, the only real luster option that I've got is this guy right here. So I'm picking ultra premium photo paper luster to do this central camera luster paper. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So then the last part right down here is, and this is actually something of a misleading thing right here. What have you guys been told about this whole output resolution right here? You have any idea what this really means? Does this have anything to do with the resolution of your file?
There's dpi and ppi.
Exactly. And so this truly is DPI, which is dots per inch, which has got nothing to do with your output resolution. What this has got to do with is, when you think about a CMYK printer, even the big ones like the one upstairs, how many inks does that guy have? 5 inks, and then like 3 blacks, something like that, so maybe 8 total, right? Does that mean it can only produce 8 colors? No, it can do a whole cornucopia of color, right? That all has to do with how small those little dots get. That's what we call dithering. To show you what that means really quickly, just because this is critical, this matters. Sorry, I didn't plan on this. Not really. I worked in Keynote because it was free to Mac people for like a long time. It's funny. I will still do layout work in Keynote and then export it to PowerPoint, and so that everybody can use PowerPoint, right? I also do slideshows online, and all of them want PowerPoint. So, sorry, that was the wrong one, but I know where the right one is. If you take a look at this slide right here, every single one of these images is made up of exactly 50% red and 50% blue squares. And you can see if you look at the top left-hand part that that's very clearly visible. But as you start to move to the lower right-hand part, you can see that as those dots start to get smaller and smaller and smaller, those begin to blend together and become essentially the color that is the two of those mixed together. That's what dithering is. So when we are in this dialog box to do the printing for this guy, that's exactly what it is. This part right here, this drop-down menu, is how small are those dots. This does not have anything to do with the resolution of your file. The resolution of your file is set by your sensor, and or you can change that in Photoshop as well, but that's where it's established. What this is talking about is how small are those little dots of ink, and the smaller they are, the more nuanced your color can be. So what this really is nuance of color. It's not more colors. Well, in a sense, it is more colors, but it is the nuance of color. And the only disadvantage to going from this 1440 DPI to 2880 is that it takes your printer almost twice as long to build the print. But the color is more nuanced, so if that matters. I've never been able to really tell the difference in the two, so I leave it at 1440. I also leave high speed on and finest detail both on. Finest detail is actually just a small sharpening algorithm, but the high speed one allows your printer to lay down ink in both directions. It used to be in the original days of doing inkjet printing that the head movement back and forth was not as precise as it is today, and you would get small misregisters. So it would travel in one way, but then when it came back, it wouldn't line up perfectly with it traveling left to right as right to left. So there would be a misregister in that, and it would cause a softness in your print. They have, for the most part, eliminated all that. You don't really need to worry about that. But if you do worry about it, you can uncheck high speed. It just means that it will only print in one direction. So it'll travel left to right and then come back and not lay down any ink, and then left to right again, and it'll only do it in one direction. So that's basically what's going on here. But the big take, say what? Mirror image will literally mirror your image. It just flips left to right.
Oh, okay.
So if it looks like this, it looks like that when you print it out. So at any rate, this is the key one right here, though, is that this media setting, that's the one that we really care about here. And also the ink set. Now, you guys know that there are two black inks, major black inks. There's a series of the lighter inks, like the light black and the light black, all of that kind of stuff. Those are not specific to paper surface. But the photo black ink, which is for a glossy surface, or in this case, a luster surface, and then matte black ink, the MK ink, those do actually matter. Now, it used to be in the old days that you could actually force the wrong ink on a wrong piece. You could force a glossy ink onto a matte paper. It's almost impossible to do that now. Epson has got this stuff so shut down. So for instance, you can't change this black ink setting right now because we've picked a paper type that's actually demanding this glossy black ink. However, the reason all of this matters is that different papers call for different amounts of ink to be laid out on them. So if you've got a matte piece of paper, it acts like a sponge. It sucks up a huge amount of ink, unlike a glossy piece of paper that's got a really polished surface and the ink sits up on that polished surface. So what these media settings are doing is they're controlling the amount of ink that actually is put out by your printer. And again, if you screw these up, all of a sudden, if you could screw it up, if you could force a matte setting on a high gloss piece of paper, what ends up coming out is ink is pooled on your paper. I mean, there's just puddles of ink that are sitting on your paper, which is, you put puddles of ink on your paper, you hit it with a hair dryer, you hang it up on the wall, you charge $200,000 for it, and you call it art. Simple. No, you wouldn't want to do that, is the answer to all of that. Okay, so once this is all done, then you would simply hit print, and it'll ask you to print these guys out. So I'm not going to do that because they've already got them printed out. So then the next step in all of this, and again, I am going to set this up over here. You guys can sort of see what this looks like. Again, before I go into this, I'm actually going to quit this program because I need to set up a completely different piece of hardware. And just like this puck right here to do your monitor, this last piece of hardware should actually be connected before you start this program. So let's say you've gone ahead and done your printout. I'm going to set it up over here because it's big. And you guys need to come take a look at this. This is the last of the hardware that I'm going to show you. But this is the thing that makes it all possible for you to do all sorts of different weird surfaces. And it's this guy right here. So everybody should come over here and look at this because you need to know how to build this thing. So this too is available at the Media Center. Actually, this is now, don't ask me why. They tell me everything has been moved down to the Media Center except for this. This is now still on the 9th floor in 623 where all the printers are. That's where this guy lives. Again, you can check this out. I'm not certain that you can take this thing home, but you can do all the work that you need to do there. So for instance, if you've got a printer at home, you can get to this stage of the game before you walk in and get this guy and check this guy out. You spend 15, 20 minutes with this guy, it does what it needs to do, whatever, you give it back to them and you go home, right? You can do multiple. If you had 10 different stocks that you wanted to do on a printer, you could print targets out for all of them. You'll see in this case, I've put notations on mine. This is on a P800. It's a central camera luster using ultra premium presentation luster media setting. That's what this is. So I know what the paper is because this is the part that makes a difference in your portfolio, in your profile. So this is what I'm going to show you guys right here. These are the things, you should write this down. I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier, but this is the critical part about doing this. So there's a series of things that matter in your profile. And I need to, is that other, yeah. The only one that has ink in it. So for your printer profile, the first thing that matters is the printer itself. So the printer, in this case it was a P800, but I'll be honest with you, this is this specific. I would not go into the digital lab up in there that's got 30 of these things and simply profile one of them and use it on another printer. That defeats the whole purpose. If you're going to do this, go to printer number 13, profile it, and then use printer number 13. Don't try to use printer number 14. You want this as exact as you can get it. And I've had people say this to me all the time. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. And I'm like, you're telling me you struggle with your printing? And then and I tell you how to fix it, and you turn around and say to me that doesn't matter?
Wait, sorry. For each one of these profiles, each profile is per paper. So you have multiple pieces of paper that are all the different papers that you want and all in the specific printer, right?
Yes. So the thing that matters is the printer. But what I'm saying to you is make this exact. Do not just do a P800 Epson. pick the printer that you want to use and use over and over. Now in the grad space up there, there's two of those guys. One of them prints matte, has got a roll for matte. One of them's got a roll for glossy. So you guys aren't going to be bouncing around because there's no reason to change those inks. So anything that you do glossy, you're going to be running through the glossy guy. Anything that's matte, you're going to be running through the matte guy. They're just set up that way, so you don't have to worry about this so much. But if you were to decide to go to use, to use the print lab, which you can use as a part of the photo department, you would again want to use, if you profile Epson number 6, use Epson number 6 to do your printing. Don't use Epson number 38. Does that sort of make sense? The more exact you can get, the better off you're going to be. So then that's the first thing. The paper is the next. So again, and it's specific. You cannot make a profile for an Epson matte paper and use it for a Hahnemühle matte paper. It has to be the exact paper, the exact whatever it is. And you guys know that Epson has got like 3,000 lusters because they just give it another name. You know, what's up with it's almost as bad as my title. Assistant Professor of Instruction. Premium Presentation, Ultra Premium 1, 2 matte. Museum quality style. Boxed. I mean, it's like, really? I mean, you guys make 6 papers. Can't you just call it, that's all you got to call it is, but no, they don't. At any rate, so the paper is critical here. Media, type. And again, in this case right here, my paper, because I'm going to put in, so it was the P800, the exact one. For the paper type, mine was, again, it was the central camera, luster. For the media type that I picked, again, that's that media setting. It was Ultra Premium Presentation Matte. I just abbreviate that as UPPM. Now, in the old days, I would also put in the ink set here, and this does matter only if you're using third-party inks. So are any of you guys doing like piezo printing, any of that kind of stuff, black and white? There's a series of inks that are made by a company, I'm not going to remember the name of the company right now, that allow you to strip all the inks out of out of an Epson printer, and you put in a set of 8 black and white, 8 grays of ink only to get an extremely extended range of black and white. You cannot, if you guys, anybody in here doing black and white printing? Then they should really look into this because it has an enormous extended range because you're printing with 8 gray inks. So you've got really black inks, you've got really, it's...
About photography?
Yes. Yeah. So have you ever done any of that?
Yeah, and I tried because I didn't notice the difference, and it's a person who
Right.
his business, and he showed me one of my pictures in black and white, the difference. It's a huge difference.
Oh yeah, it's massive. It's massive. And if you guys ever really are serious about doing other alternative black and whites, there's far better ways of doing black and white, even with these Epsons, than what most people do, but nonetheless. So it used to be, again, you would put down the ink set that you're using if you're using a third-party ink set. So if you're using something like that, if you were foolish enough to go to Costco to refill your cartridges with Costco ink instead of Epson ink, which you can do, you would want to put Costco ink on here because, again, whatever ink set that you're using for your profile, you need to do the printing part. So I am going to put in the ink type. So I will put in ink type. And in this case, it's a K3. That's actually the Epson designation for the ink that goes into this printer. And then finally, I do my initials. So I'm going to just put in name and date. So again, and I abbreviate my name, VER, and the date would be 20190913 because it's today's date. Because just like doing your monitor on different occasions, profiles eventually become worthless because they've changed the ink set so much, the ink it drifts far away. Now Epson has gotten to the point where they have really consistent ink, but they're making it in gigantic batches. So this profile will be really great for 6 months, maybe a year, but after a year's time, whatever, you might want to consider reprofiling again because there's going to be a batch of ink. It just gets different enough that if, again, you really care about your printing, that's what's going to happen here. So with this in mind, this is how you set this guy up. So you guys, you don't have to stand up. I'll show it to you. You're welcome to stand up, but I'll open this up here. So when you open this thing up, there is a measuring easel in here. it looks like this. So this is a measuring easel that's right here. There's a slider in this. This is actually controls how this thing goes. This is what makes doing this thing so fast. So this thing, you'll see that there's an edge on this that's actually got transparency on this side, and then it's got a foot along this bottom that slides back and forth. So this right here is a clipboard. So it's actually designed to hold your print up here at the top. I'm going to show it to you in just a second, so you'll see what's going on here. This clear edge points up to the top, so this thing slides up and down. Does this sort of make sense? So that's the beginning part of this. To actually set your print in here, which I'm going to do, you'll notice that this has now been printed out. There is a thing that's right on here that says this is page 1 of 2. If I had done the big target, we would have 4 pages, and they're just marked. So this is 1 of 2, this is 2 of 2. So it's just the number of pages. If we had printed this out on a Super B 13 by 19, there would just be one single of these pages, right? The 13 by 19 fits right in here. Do stand up. You guys need to come over here. You got to see this part, because if you don't do this right, this is going to screw up. If we had, and I don't have one here, if we had a Super B 13 by 19 piece of paper, it would fit exactly in these grooves right here. You would simply open this guy up, tuck it up underneath that, it would fit in these grooves. However, with paper like this, so this is letter size paper right here. Again, this is page 1 of 2 right here. This guy, when you load it in, you have got to load it in the middle. You do not set this all the way over like this. If you do that, the thing can't measure it. It can't do this part. So this thing gets centered. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. I pretty much eyeball it, but that looks about right, don't you think? About centered, possibly just a little, but it's close enough, right? So this is actually going to be centered on this part right now. Again, this top clear edge sits here and it rides up on this print like this, so you'll see how the rest of this works. So then you go into this part of it in here, and somebody has not put in the USB cable. And somebody should be spanked really hard for that one. So, and they've put this back in, they've jammed this in wrong. All of this is not how this should actually be. So then you say to yourself, Verser, do you have a USB cable that's actually going to fit this thing? And thank goodness we're next to my office. So this fits in the back, regular USB cable. It sits on this cradle. And then it gets plugged in. I'll show you how to get this thing set up, and then I'm going to move it back over here to show you how to actually print with it. I mean, to measure with it. All right. So, back in the software. Again, if I've already launched this software because this thing was not plugged in, I would quit the software and restart it. You want to make sure that this thing is plugged in when you start the software, just like we've done everything else. So again, it's the i1 profiler.
This specific setup is called what?
When you ask for it, you say, I want the i1 profiler print profiling package. And tell them it's the thing that looks like a large briefcase, fat briefcase, whatever. That's what it is. They only have one of these, so that's the guy. Okay, so again, in printer profiling, we've actually again, this matters. You've got to reset all of this up to exactly the thing that you printed because it knows, it expects certain colors depending on the printer you used. So again, we did use the medium target. We did use the default layout, patch part, whatever. I'm going to go to the next one. And it's going to say here that it cannot find this guy. So I'm going to click on reconnect. And it'll say this is going to take 30 seconds to do it. This thing has been wonky in the past, so I'm hoping that this actually works. We'll see.
So there are two of them, or this is the one from Media Center?
This is the one from the Media Center.
There's only one?
There's only one. But you'll see, people only use this. It takes like 10 or 15 minutes, and then you're done with it, and you don't use it again for 6 months.
What floor was it again?
On the floor? No, this is on the 9th floor now,
Oh, just
in 623.
Is the USB port always, seems like it wasn't in the brief?
It's not in there, so I'm either going to donate this one, but I'm going to go back and say to them, hey folks, this guy wasn't in there.
But if you also want to profile, like I have a 27-inch at home,
Mhm.
can you take that home and do it? That's the only way to do it, right?
No. Take the software home,
Yeah.
print the targets out,
Yeah.
bring the targets in to the 9th floor, do the measurement, and you're good to go. All right, so at this stage of the game, a couple of tricks that you can try. The first is to come up to the, you guys can't see shit here, can you? Come up to the Apple menu, come down to About This Macintosh. Click on System Report. Click on USB, because that's how this connection is, and take a look to see, and you can see right here, the i1 profiler is actually visible. So the problem is not with the computer, the problem is now with the software. So I am simply going to restart my entire computer. And I'm going to stop this.